Welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, your daily dose of inspiration and innovation in the world of manufacturing. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, ready to dive into another fascinating conversation. But before we get started, a quick shout out to our listeners. Don't forget to check out all of our amazing content at manufacturingculturepodcast.com and join our vibrant community on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And a huge thank you to our sponsor, Spironi, who are true pioneers in precision and innovation, perfectly aligning with the spirit of our podcast. Now, let's introduce a guest who's as versatile and dynamic as they come. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to welcome Zach Carlin to the show. Zach's journey is a tapestry of relentless drive and diverse experiences. He's not just any professional. He's been a professional athlete in 3 sports, embodying the spirit of competition and excellence. But Zach didn't stop there. He ventured into the entrepreneurial world with an intriguing flair, flipping and selling gyms and proving that his business acumen is as sharp as his athletic prowess. Beyond these impressive feats, Zach has also been a guiding force in executive leadership, coaching industry titans like HP, Salesforce, and Tamco. His insights and strategies have empowered leaders to navigate the complex challenges of the corporate world with finesse and confidence. Zach's expertise even extends to the manufacturing industry, where he has served as the VP of Development for Window Manufacturing Company, bringing his unique perspective and innovative strategies to the table. Today, Zach is a captain of his own destiny, running a successful business consulting firm that specializes in scaling small to medium-sized businesses. His approach is not just about growth, it's about transformative growth, making businesses not just bigger, but better and more resilient. So gear up for an episode filled with insights, inspiration, and incredible stories as we chat with Zach Carlin about his journey, his lessons, and his vision for the future of business and even manufacturing. Welcome to the show, Zach. How's your day going today?
It's going amazing, and I'm gonna want that recording because I'm gonna listen to that every morning and get me hyped up.
You got it, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. That was. I'm really happy to be here. This is going to be a good conversation.
You're very welcome. I'm really excited for the conversation. Zach, are you old enough to remember Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live?
I am.
Okay, so that's what you can do with that recording every morning. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Just listen to that every morning, pump yourself up, get ready for the day.
That's my affirmations. I love
it. Absolutely. So Zach, you've got a heck of a story, my man. I'm really interested to hear what your journey has been. Why are you and I talking today? I mean, what led you to this part in your journey where we're having this conversation?
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you asking that, because that's one thing that's been so introspective, insightful, and doing these podcasts and having these kind of conversations. I talk about a lot of stuff I just haven't even thought of before, even.
Yeah.
Right. So that the question of how did we end up talking? I ask myself that a lot. I'm like, how did I get here? How am I talking to this person? How am I in this room? I was at a business planning workshop in Fort Lauderdale with one of my mentor groups, Patrick Bet David. And I was in a room and I'm like, I kind of stop. I'm having cigars with these people. And I'm like, how did I get here? Because I look back and, when I was 18, 19 years old, I barely graduated high school. I didn't graduate high school. Actually, I had to go back and get my GED, and I was homeless at 18, 19.
Oh, wow.
Right? So to look back and then be like, how did I get here is wild. So I grew up in a really small town in Canada. I'm actually Canadian, so apologize if that offends anybody, but Canada is what it is.
Not going to offend anybody. We may talk hockey or French curlers or Tim Hortons or something like that.
I still love my Timmies, but very small town. I'm a country kid, born and raised in the country. Population, the town's called Claresholm. I think when I was growing up, population like 900, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Very small. Yeah. So if you weren't doing sports, you were into drugs, basically, is where I was. So for the most part, it was sports. I was a karate black belt by the time I was 8.
Wow.
I got into hockey right around that time. I was 7 or 8 when I got into hockey. I played basketball, football, badminton was actually one of my favorite sports in high school, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, track, all that stuff, everything.
Yeah.
And then hockey was it wasn't my dream, it was somebody else's dream, which is fine, right? And I kind of rebelled, and then I chose the other
As one
choice,
does.
right? Yeah, I chose the other choice, and we lived on a highway. It's called the Crow's Nest Pass. It kind of goes right up the middle of the Rocky Mountains over there,
Okay.
and it was owned by the Hells Angels, so it was very easy to get into drugs and bad crowd. And that was probably, if you look back at kind of giving your past experience credit, that's where it really got ingrained in me as you are a product of who you surround yourself with, and you have a choice, right? And also kind of what real friends are,
Sure.
right? And it's usually not typically what you think. But anyways, and then so 18, 19, one of my boxing coaches is named Gord. Still don't know his last name, just Gord. Don't need to either. He looked like a gourd. And I remember I was sleeping in one of those, it's like a horizontal slide, like those little tubes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I was laying down in one of those in one of our playgrounds in just outside of Claresholm. And I remember he kicked me so hard in the calf. I still feel it whenever whenever I'm down or I feel, sorry for myself or whatever it is, I can feel that sting. And he kicked me. He's like, you need to get your, I don't know if I can swear in here, but you need to get your shit together.
You can
Okay,
confess.
yeah, you need to get your shit together and get a job and all this kind of stuff. And when you're so far down, looking up at that, it looks really far away.
Sure.
So it's almost like poor me. How am I going to get out of this? And he's just like, let's just go buy you a new shirt, and let's just start there. So we went to the bargain store and I bought a red shirt with like one of those melty kind of yellow smiley faces on it. Still remember the shirt, and got a shirt. Wrote a resume. Luckily, I had somebody who knew me. I mean, everybody knows everybody in a town like that, but somebody who still kind of believed in me a little bit. And I got a job at the swimming pool. And the swimming pool just happened to be attached, again, small town. We tend to put a lot of things in one building. Was a part of the addictions unit.
Okay.
Where I ended up visiting.
Yep.
Where my mom was the admissions coordinator.
Interesting twist of events.
Interesting twist, exactly. So you can believe, again, being in a small town, people know like those small town politics. I had a certain reputation, and I mostly felt bad for my mom. So I wanted to get out of there as quick as I could. But kind of what got me out of everything was I started competing in mixed martial arts again. I kind of got back into taking care of my body, getting clean, eating well, working hard, and getting kind of obsessed again. So then I had just before I turned 20, I had a sister that moved to Las Vegas. So I said, oh, this is my chance. So she was a nurse, and if I get beat up, she can take care of me, which I did. So I moved to Las Vegas, competed in mixed martial arts professionally for about 3.5 years.
Okay.
An injury took me out. Ended up having to leave the country. Met my now ex-wife, but she was my wife at the time. Met her there. We moved back to Canada, and then that's when kind of my entrepreneurial journey kind of started. So I came back and started my second sport, which was CrossFit. Got to travel the world. Competed in Brazil, Dubai, France, all over the U.S., Canada. Yeah, and who knew it was a sport? Until I started doing it, I was like, oh, okay, this is fun. I get to compete and not get hit all the time. So it was good. It's
good. A step up for you. Yeah.
It was a step up, yeah. And but it was still like an 1.5-hour drive from where I was from, a small town. So we moved to Calgary and I ended up buying into the gym that I was in. It was small minority kind of owner sort of thing. And I saw our first P&L statement, and I was like, it was like single digits. And I was like, I thought owning a business was more profitable than this, but no, it wasn't. So I was so enthralled in competing. So I'd train 3 times a day. I was doing 12 workouts a week. So when you're not doing that, you're just resting.
Yeah.
Trying not to do anything. Eating, mostly. Eating and getting massages and that kind of stuff. So anyways, I kind of used that downtime to learn about how can I make that number go up.
Okay.
So that's where it kind of really started for me. So I kind of became obsessed with it as a hobby because my identity was still tied to
competing
and I'm not supposed to be a business owner. I went back and got my GED by that time, but I barely graduated and whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So you kind of put yourself in shackles based on some past experiences.
Absolutely.
Right? And I had done that. So it was always a hobby.
Yep.
But we made the number go up with getting better coaches, improving, diversifying revenue streams, partnering with some, I ended up getting some supplement sponsors. So learning how to negotiate with them and bringing in products so that we could sell the product. And then we started, okay, because in the same thing in manufacturing plants, you're a lot of times, especially in your first building, it's the square footage that's holding you back in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right. So it's how do you maximize the square footage in whether it's a manufacturing plant, like for us, it was when we were manufacturing windows, how can we utilize every square footage so that we can make a profit with every square foot, right? Because you're really limited on space. Same thing in gyms, you're limited by time and square footage. So it's how can you optimize square footage, right, of the gym? So, that's where we would, we put up, it was not great, but we put up like these 2 standalone blind wall things. So like when we brought in like massage therapists, and so like parts of the gym that weren't otherwise being utilized are now being leased out. So anyway, so we started understanding a lot of that stuff. Okay. And then we got into the marketing, and by the time I exited that one, the number was higher than initially, which was great.
Then the single digit that you originally saw.
Yeah. And then kind of replicated that with a different gym. It was a little bit different style, but it still worked. A lot of it still worked. And then by the time I had done with that gym, so that was my second gym, I kind of had a little bit of a framework. So I was more like, I guess I'm doing this now. So then I would leave and then kind of plop that framework into another one. And at one point I had 3 of them. So that was my 3rd, 4th, and 5th gym. And they were running very well, just again, based on marketing, diversifying revenue streams, bundling, having great people around. Client retention was a big focus. LTV was a big focus. And then I kind of had a formula, right? And then from there, I moved from Calgary, Alberta to Edmonton. One of my sponsors, we decided to partner. We had a gym equipment manufacturing company. Okay. And we scaled that from about 1.8 to just a little over 20 million in about 3 years.
Wow. That's a heck of a...
We had a very good... Yeah, we had... It sounds... I mean, it was... I mean, we took advantage of what we had, for sure. Yeah. Everything ran well. He had his kind of mothership company. This is more of his passion project. His mothership company, the guy that I partnered with, was a transportation logistics. So he had a huge warehouse. He already had the transportation, the logistics. All that was very thought out. Like that was his baby. So that helped a lot. And then I had some good connections. And again, we went from just selling equipment to big gyms. Like, okay, how can we get more profit per like square footage of steel? So we would start to lease. We would buy big rigs and then lease it to competitions or conventions and shows, so that we could get more profit per basically square footage of steel.
Yeah.
And also there was getting to be some like shipping, like lead times were brutal right there, because a lot of it we were getting from China. So lead times were bad. So we had to think outside the box. So then we had to get, okay, what do we have right now, and optimize, our profit per rig or whatever. Yeah. And then so we started getting partnerships for leasing, which not a lot of people were doing. So we got a lot of good business through that. Because then we would go and put everything together. Our team would go and put everything together, where these competitions and conventions usually would have to buy it, hire a team, put it in themselves, where we're like, well, why don't we just do it for you?
Yeah.
Pay us. And then, we started getting some residuals off of that and kind of thing. So there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah. And we took advantage of it. And then we had a daughter, moved back to Vegas. And then I started, that was around COVID. So everyone knows how that went. So then that's when I met my former partner. We started my first kind of leadership consulting agency, and that's when I got to work with some Salesforce, HP, Tamco, Car Gurus, sales. There's a lot of, obviously, mostly like insurance, smaller SMEs kind of stuff, and then my company that I'm currently fractional with, which is the Morph Windows, where we manufacture, sell, and install custom window replacement. So that's kind of how I ended up here. And then me and my partner, we started Summit Chasers, because this is what we're passionate about. We're passionate about business, small to medium-sized businesses that, kind of, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that kind of, they're solopreneurs, or they're passionate about something, and then they wake up one day and they're like, crap, I have a business, I have a
Yeah.
company, right? I should maybe, try to
Focus on that.
create
Yeah.
a foundation, and because they either wake up and they're like, oh crap, I have this thing, I have to focus on it, organize it, and get good people around me, or they're in it so much, like they're so consumed with the day to day, the whirlwind, that
Yeah.
they never step back and be like, okay, how can I, like, this isn't what I thought success looked like.
Yeah.
So that's a big passion of mine, especially those that kind of have weird backgrounds like me. A lot of visionaries have weird backgrounds, and I think that they deserve the success. So we want the success of small businesses to be an expectation, not an anomaly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've competed. So we heard about, the mixed martial arts and the CrossFit. What was the third sport that you were?
Strongman.
Oh, you were a strongman too.
Strongman. Yeah. So when I had just during COVID, because there was nothing really to do other than go to
Yeah.
the gym. So, and they were doing a whole bunch of online competitions for strongman, and
Wow.
I love to lift, and in CrossFit I was one of the stronger guys, so I just kind of dove into that. And then there was a competition. It's called Clash on the Coast, and if you qualified for this competition, you got your pro card. So I was like, okay, I had 6 months to train, and I did it, and I ended up the top 15 qualified, and I think I was like eighth.
That's
So
awesome, man.
I ended up getting to do a couple pro strongman competitions before I had to really focus on business,
That's
making
neat.
money, right? So, yeah, it was strongman. Interesting.
That's
It's
neat.
a weird mix of sports, but
Hey, I mean, to me, they all tie together, but
mm,
I'm not standing up. You can't see the like physical god that I am, but
mm,
they all sound similar to me. But that's just who I am. Um, with that experience in professional sports, and then self-taught on the business side, how have you brought those principles from your competing days, right? Sportsmanship, competition, a mindset of winning, to the leadership styles that you coach your clients through.
yeah, I think that's there's a few, and that's another reason I love meeting people and having these kind of conversations, because I think like a month ago that would have been tough for me to answer. Right, other
Okay.
than like the cliche, like, oh, the hard work and overcoming things, right? Because obviously you do develop some sort of resilience.
Yeah.
Right? You do, getting beat up all the time in the gym, or beating yourself up all the time in the gym.
Yeah.
To All you're doing is you're increasing the possibility of success. You're not guaranteeing anything. All you're doing is you're increasing the possibility of it. So you can kill yourself, not literally in the gym, eat perfectly, take care of yourself perfectly. It's the whole ball of wax that has to work together. That's one really big takeaway, is that you can't just be super focused in one area and it, hope that it overcomes the lack of focus in other areas, right? Everything has to work
Sure.
together. Everyone, a lot of people you hear, you can't outwork out a bad diet, sort of thing. But there's about a
Uh,
million different pieces that have to work together, especially in those types of sports I was in, because they're so dynamic.
yeah.
Um, and then obviously you can work that hard and still not get your goal.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, all you're doing is you're training and working to increase the odds of the outcome you want. You're not guaranteed anything. So understanding that, okay, I failed. Did I do my best? If I did my best, if I truly believe that I did everything I could, that just means, okay, now I need to do something different.
Hmm.
Right. Not a lot of people, they don't. I think in business, that was one thing that it really helped me with, is they fail or whatever. Like, okay, I'm gonna do the same thing again, but I'm gonna try a little bit harder.
Right.
Right? Whereas you have to step back and, okay, if I didn't try really hard, if I didn't put everything into it, what do I have to do differently to do that? And if I did do that, what do I have to do differently to get the different outcome?
Yeah.
Right. So it gives you a different perspective on how to fail,
Hmm.
which, I mean, some people would say that's not a great skill, but I mean, I'm good at it.
It
I'm good at
happens
it.
to everybody, man.
Hmm.
I tell people all the time, failure is inevitable.
Hmm.
The lesson is to fail. When you fail fast and learn from the mistake and move on, right?
Yeah.
And that goes for my 9-year-old, or me running a business, or my clients, right?
Mhm.
Failure is inevitable.
Yeah. You have to be good at it. It's a skill that you have to, if you want to be successful, you have to do things that are different, and you have to be creative. And if you're creating something, you don't know the outcome.
Yeah,
So you have to be okay with failing, right?
absolutely.
There's no blueprint for a lot of what we do. So you
Yeah,
just have to try stuff. You have to create it. And
yeah.
they're usually when you're like, I don't know how many planes did they crash before they actually built a plane that flew. I mean,
Uh, the Wright brothers built a bunch of those wooden things.
yeah, there's a ton, right? But
Yeah,
they didn't give up. They knew how to fail, because when it failed, they had a system that they followed to improve it for the next time, right?
yeah,
I think that was a big one. That was a big one for me, is just how to fail,
yeah.
and understanding that you can do everything right and you still might fail, and you
Sure.
still might not get the outcome that you want. That was those were big for
Yeah,
me. I think the takeaways.
I get that. Flipping gyms is a unique experience, right? I mean, there's no two ways about it. You are literally the very first person that I've ever talked to that has been a flipper of gyms.
Mm.
Have you done that more than once?
So I did it with. So I think I had four. Purposely, I did it with four on purpose. Well, because I had. I know it sounds. So there were six total.
Okay.
The first two, I wasn't. I just wanted a place to work out, and I
Yeah.
was learning. And then the next four, I was like, oh, I can. This is what I could do. This.
Yeah.
Like, I have a system. I can just go and do it. So there was four that I did it on purpose, and two that I was just a part of.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so with that experience, um, I'm sure culture played a big part in getting that turned around, right? Um, Talk to us about how you've been able to successfully transform organizations, whether they're the gyms that you were flipping and made profitable, or the window company, or some of your other clients through Summit Chasers.
Yeah. No, absolutely. A lot of it's just about rowing in the same direction,
Okay.
right?
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, in gyms. So to speak on those first, you're not just worried about your employees. They have to be the champions of the culture 1,000%,
Hmm.
like true champions of it. And
Yeah.
then it's almost like because there are a lot of them was like class fitness, right? So everybody's very close,
Yeah.
right? You would get cliques, and they'd have parties, and they'd meet their future husbands and wives there and that kind of stuff. And we would throw birthday parties for them and all that kind of stuff. So you're worrying about your members, like the culture of
Hmm.
your members. So you have to have the balls to understand that, okay, this is the outcome. Always talking outcomes. This is the outcome if we let a few bad apples in, because they can scare a lot of people away,
Yeah.
right? And they can mess with that, right? But it's tough, because when I say you have to have balls, is that you're saying no to money, you're saying no to a couple new memberships and possible sales and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You have to have the balls to look further in the future rather than just right here all the time, and make
Okay.
decisions based on keeping that, because long term, that's everything. And
Yeah.
especially in the gyms like that, because everyone was so close. Like I said, people would meet. I don't have enough fingers to count how many husband and wives that met for the first time, sweating
Right.
on the gym floor. Right. So having a vetting process for your customers sometimes is, if you're in the
Interesting.
service, like especially if you're in any sort of service where you have, whether it's a mastermind or you have group coaching calls or anything like that, like, have the balls to vet your even your customers that come in and say no to some
Yeah.
people, because long term, because then they're usually the ones that, if they're not a great fit, or if they're loud or whatever it is, they're always the ones that end up leaving anyways, and maybe take a couple people with them, and then they go
Yep.
do the bad reviews, and then it's almost like it's kind of inconceivable how much negative effect that would have,
Absolutely.
right? And then it's the same if we're going to a manufacturing plant. Your margin of error is really, really small.
Okay.
Like, it's very small. Like, I'm a big Six Sigma fan, Kaizen, the Toyota way type of thing. And they have it's so structured that, let's say, like, okay, this person abides by our core values at a 94 out of 100, right? It's hard. But if you get somebody who's, 50% abides by the core values, right, they're much less likely to adhere to your process. They're much less likely to, okay, they're having a bad day,
Hmm.
right? They're more likely to take it out on whatever. They're more likely to not follow through. They're more likely to not stay at their station. They're more likely to not cover somebody's ass, right? Then it screws up a lot of those safety nets. So it's one of the culture is one of those, and it's funny. You can say like, how's your company culture to 20 different, leaders or execs or founders, and they'd say 20 different things.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
What does it mean to you? Right? And it's just everybody rowing in the same direction. And if you don't have that, and I think especially a great example is in a manufacturing plant where it's overlooked because those margins are so small, right? And the room for error is so small too that it just like, all that stuff makes such a huge difference. Like imagine if you have somebody like on your who's like a QC, somebody at the end of your line who all of a sudden doesn't give a shit about your product, your service, or your customers, who's just like scanning stuff. Yeah, good, wrap it up and whatever, and send it out, throwing it. Like it makes a big difference. Where most manufacturing plant managers will just be like, okay, something's wrong with the floor, or something's wrong with the machine, or something's wrong with the process. Very rarely are they going to look at, okay, this person's just not a good fit for this role, even though he's doing the right things, he's pressing the right buttons.
Yeah.
Right. So it gets a lot of it gets hidden, but it has big effects.
Absolutely. What kind of similarities or differences have you seen in company culture as a concept, or even specifically between the different types of industries that you've worked with? I mean, fitness and wellness to some major tech giants in HP and Salesforce to manufacturing. How does culture differ, or is it similar between different organizations of different industries?
Yeah, no, it has to be different, right? It has to be but the thing that shouldn't be different is the level of adherence to it.
Sure.
Right? So we'll see. There's a lot of companies, a lot of different industries. So like let's just say for fitness first, right? It's very different in the way of that industry is evolving a lot. So you need to be a lot more creative. So therefore the culture is a little bit more, it's less follow everything to a T, and it's more like, okay, everybody has fun. Everybody has to, be nice to each other and push each other and not let each other off the hook and work really hard. But then after you're done working really hard, you're slapping each other on the butt and you're going to have a beer or some wings or whatever afterwards, right?
Right.
So it's the culture is a lot more just be creative, support each other, whatever, right? And because of that, you can have people who don't necessarily abide 100% to it, but they don't necessarily hurt it either.
Okay.
Right. But then you can't have people who totally screw with it and are dicks and all that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But there is a lot more room between I'm just here to get a good workout in and don't really care about anything else. And hoorah, I'm gonna, sleep with everybody in the gym sort of thing. That's not good either. But you know what I mean? Like they're all friends and they go to each other's birthday parties and they have, they invite them to Christmas sometimes, right? So there's a big gap there. But then when you get into some of these other companies, like when we were working with Hewlett Packard, I'm a huge fan of those two.
Yeah.
Right? Bill Hewlett and David Packard, huge fan of them. Like they were so big, like their culture was amazing when they were first getting started, and you can still see some of that resonating a little bit now.
Okay.
But they just wanted to have a great company. They didn't even, when they started in their garage, they did not know what their product was going to be. They're just like, let's just start a great company. And that's what they focused on, a great company. It's crazy. But when I was working with them, so they had just acquired a company called Zerto, and we were working with their sales team. And they had a really cool culture too, where it was a little bit more hands off, right? It was, you allowed your AEs to be a little bit more, do what you need to do to get the clients, just meet your quota.
Okay.
Type of thing. And they attracted people who worked really well in that type of environment. And then people who needed guidance, who needed hand holding, who needed to have the whip cracked on, they didn't last very long. You could see that. So going back to the fitness thing, like the gap between what was acceptable and what was perfect company culture, right, was pretty large. Then you get into a company like this to where it seemed pretty lax, but then these people, if they're not driven, if they're not able to kind of self-sustain, then they don't make it. So now the gap to what is perfect company culture and what's accepted is a lot smaller.
Sure.
Right? And then you get into these manufacturing plants, like it's almost like this.
Makes
Like
sense.
because again, your margins for error are so much smaller, right? Like something goes out of whack, right? If you have a maintenance guy who's not, diligent, on time, works hard, works well with everybody else, he communicates well with everybody else. Something goes down, you're losing tens, hundreds, millions of dollars depending on what you're manufacturing, right? So the room for error is a lot slimmer,
Sure.
right?
That makes total sense.
Similar to leadership styles,
Yeah.
right? Like you can have a leader who's just more of a facilitator, right? Just make sure deadlines are hit and it facilitates. And then you have the leader who's like, if your foot goes over here, you're fucking us up, right? So I think that was a long-winded way to say, I think the biggest difference is just the level of adherence that's needed to keep that company culture.
Yeah. What in your experience, what is the impact that leadership has on company culture, regardless of the industry?
No, it's absolutely everything. They're your champions. They're your champions of your culture. And even in the gym space, whether there was one owner and then just coaches, right? You would then say, if you're looking at an org chart, it's like, okay, a leader and a bunch of people that follow him, right? Where really those are your champions because they're directly facing your clients. So those are the champions, right? They are of the utmost importance.
Yeah.
You go to wherever, like you go to Tamco or Lamenco or whatever other company I've worked with, like those managers are the ones that get the new hires in and are training them. So they have to be, this isn't kind of a controversial word to use, but they have to, like, they indoctrinate the culture in them.
Yeah.
So they have to be, they're the ones that are passing on the baton, right? And they're the ones creating the next level of manager, which what you don't want to do, and this is, I can't remember what the law is, but there's a book by David Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, I think it's called. But he says, I think it's I can't remember what the law is called, but the premise is where the further you go down an org chart, right, the less dedicated, the less skill there will be, because you have your founders who usually, I'm not saying all the time, so I'm not trying to offend anybody who's listening to this, they hire people who are about 80% as competent in their job as they are.
Okay.
Right? Whether it's because of ego or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Just bad hiring practices. But generally, you hire somebody who's 80% as competent as you are. Now you have whether it's an executive or director line that's 80% as competent as the founders. Now they're in charge of hiring under them. Now they will hire people who are 80% as competent as them, typically.
Interesting.
And the further you go down, actually, the worse it gets, because then the more ego and the more scarcity mindset, because I don't want to lose my job, or I want to move up, or whatever it is, right? So that you keep hiring 80%. Same thing with culture. If you don't have that front line, whether your HR does your hiring, HR is extremely important that they are the culture, right? But if a lot of companies, especially SMEs, their managers are doing the hiring. So if they're not completely ingrained in absolute champions of your culture, they're going to hire people who are 70, 80% as ingrained as them. And then they're in charge of hiring, and that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Right. So you have to be, as a company, you have to be the most successful businesses out there are so, like, you can just say their name and you're like, what their culture is. Like, it's so, like, if I say Nike, like, what it is without even having to, right?
Yeah.
Zappos was one too, right? You knew what their culture was. Like, if you don't have that and it's not defined with whether it's values, principles, a mission statement, a purpose statement, whatever that is, and it's not continually almost over communicated.
Yeah.
Not just overly communicated, but overly practiced upon, like almost fanatically, it gets lost over time. And then 10 years down the road, you're wondering, why does everybody suck? And I can't keep anybody, and yada, yada, yada. So it's, again, I'm giving you long-winded answers here, but I can't state enough how important it is for your frontline managers to be as bought in and as grained into the culture as possible.
Yeah, they have to live it on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's one thing I talk with clients and I talk at trade shows and conferences about is the everybody has a culture, whether it's defined or not, right? the healthier cultures are typically the ones where the values of the organization and the values of the employee are aligned, right?
Mhm.
I break culture down as simply as that, right? You talk about rowing a boat in the same direction. I talk about alignment. Same, same.
Same thing.
Um, but if your frontline leaders, if your top line leadership isn't living that culture that they desire on a day to day basis, there will still exist a culture. It just won't be the culture that they want.
Yeah, and you're right. There's always a culture, whether it's what you want it to be, what it should be, or that there always is.
Yeah.
And and that's the other thing too. Like if you're out, a company or whoever founder leaders listening to this, and you have written out core values, right? That's not something you just put on a bumper sticker. Like
Right.
you have to, as much as you say it, you have to abide by it. Double that.
Yep.
Because once they see you slip up once, like if one of your core values is collaborative, and then you start making decisions without communicating, they're going to be like, well, they don't care about that. Even though you say it all the time, they're just going to be like,
Absolutely.
yeah, 100%.
And the other thing with values, along that same line, they can't just be words on a wall or on a bumper sticker, right? You have to define what that word means to your organization, because collaboration, going back to your example of asking 20 executives what culture is, they'd give you 20 different answers. Well, if you ask 20 executives, even within the same organization, what does collaboration mean? You're going to get 20 different answers,
Mhm.
right? So you may have these words that you throw up on a wall or throw on a bumper sticker or t-shirts or whatever, but those don't really mean anything unless you define what exactly that word means to the organization, right?
Well, 1,000%. And that's where I like the combination of you have core values and then you have business principles. The business principles are almost the definitions, like the defining actions, tenets
Sure.
of your core values. So and I use collaboration as an example. So one of the companies that we work with, one of theirs is collaborative. And then the principles that we coincided with that was, well, one of them that's on the top of my head is, decision haven't been made until everybody needed to execute that decision has been communicated with.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be a definition of collaboration that they had to abide by. But if I would have asked that to them without, making the principles, they'd have been like, I mean, I talk to people in the hallway all the time. You know what I mean? It could be whatever, right? Like I answer my texts. Like it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So manufacturing is a traditional industry, right? Traditional structures, traditional companies, traditional people within it. Um, in your experience working with manufacturers and tech companies, what what kind of strategies have you found are most effective for fostering cultures of, let's say, innovation and creativity and maybe even accountability within more traditional structured organizations?
Yeah. So one thing that really worked with one of our because it was Morph that really worked was, like I said, when they're on the line, they don't like you don't be creative. You stick with the process, right? And then if you identify something, you bring it up afterwards. Don't try to fix it on the fly, right? Just
Right.
just just stick with it. But creating that space outside of that where they can be like where you can get that live feedback I think is really really crucial. Like you don't just get them on the line, they have their breaks, eat lunch in silence, and then they just go home,
Yeah.
right? They're the ones out there seeing everything. They see the equipment. They see the products come through. They're the ones that are wrapping it and getting it sent out. Create a space, whether it's you do like a morning stand up, which is like, hey, what
Hmm.
is something that you saw yesterday that you can improve on or that can be improved on? Um, what was our if like we want to do 1,000 windows a day, how many windows did we hit? 990. Okay, where did those other 10 go? And you
Yeah.
get that feedback. So create that space, but it has to be separate. That's the difference, though. It has to be separated from the line.
Yeah.
Like so, take the time off of that. And I think that was one thing that it took some time to convince our couple managers that we worked with in the plants to do. Because again, it's like if we hit our numbers, it's great. Well, eventually our numbers are going to be 2,000 a day. So
Sure.
we can't. We have to be constantly, okay, well, how can we improve this, right? So I think that constant frontline feedback, providing that time and space for constant feedback is huge.
I love it. I love it. Um, you brought up technology in that answer. How do you think manufacturers could utilize technology, digital tools better to enhance the culture of their organization?
I think just to use it. Like it's simple. So and the reason I say that is because every manufacturing plant. So when I worked with Tamco, they manufacture shingles. So I was in their manufacturing plant there, and with it Morph and then Lamanco too. They do vents for roofs,
Okay.
and the big thing is they two of the three used. I can't remember what Lamanco used, but two of the three used a system called Finavision,
Okay.
and I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Mm-mm.
But it's used to key in like the measurements. So we'd have measure techs out in the field. They measure the windows on a house. They would send in the measurements, and then we would type everything into Finavision. And Finavision basically just spits everything out. It puts it out on the line, and then it starts the process, right? And then
Cool.
Finavision also intakes from the QC department. Boom, it's done, right? But we use it. That's the thing. A lot of plants they get this technology in, and they use it for maybe 5% of its capabilities, right? Like, so
Yep.
we were, a lot of them will stick to manual entry for a lot of measurements. When all they
Wow.
need, when Finavision has a system where the measure tech can type in all the measurements, comes in, all we have to do is just look at it, make sure the numbers don't look wacky, and then it just goes, as opposed to
Sure.
having people who sit there and key in orders, opening it up for mistakes, right? I think it's all about just minimizing mistakes
Yeah.
and use it for that. Anything where you have to manually go through and check things over and over again
Yeah.
constantly, that's going to create mistakes no matter what, right?
I
So
get it.
utilizing the processes and the systems and technology, actually utilizing them to their fullest capacity, because I mean, then they're so in this industry, and you know this, a lot of it, there's a lot of old thinking
Yeah.
in it, right? Like, I don't want to eliminate people altogether. Well, you're not eliminating them. You're creating an environment where you need to have the people that you do have need to be really, really good at what they do.
You can upskill,
You can
right?
exactly, you can upscale, you can go faster, you can create more
Yeah.
consistent. So you go from a 99 point, what is a Six Sigma, like 99.996? You can go from 99.996 to 9996, right? Like, which is a big, in a grand, like if you're doing 2,000 windows a
That's
day or whatever
massive.
you're doing, it's huge. That is gigantic,
Absolutely.
right? Like, that's like how many, like, it just takes one bad job, and then the reviews come in, and it's just, then you miss sales, and it's hard to quantify it, but it's brutal. But I think
Yeah.
a lot of that for the tech is like in QC, and then just taking out human error, like,
Yeah.
as much as you can, and utilize the systems that are being created right now. There's some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff.
How can leadership teams that want to go on a cultural journey, whether that's a more positive or just a change in their culture, how can they ensure that those changes to their culture are sustainable and not just temporary fixes?
I don't know. I love that question. A lot of it's going to come in how you hire.
Okay.
Right?
Tell
So
us more.
so many people, so many leaders, they hire for like the day-to-day activities of a role, right?
Sure.
Which again, and this is kind of why I love what you're doing, like manufacturing. It's kind of almost on the tail end of that, because they come in, they just have to press these buttons. They just have to do this and that. But what you don't look at when you're hiring is the culture fit, is the
Yeah.
attitude fit, the behavior, the traits, the habits, that kind of stuff. So it is ingraining that in your hiring process, and a lot of that is defined by, when you're hiring for a role. Again, it's not just about the activities. What do I need this person to accomplish?
Yep.
I need somebody to come in and accomplish not just this current role, but I need to create a foundation of people who I can grow this plant around. Because I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you're trying to grow,
Right.
right? Your line needs to get bigger. You're going to have more diverse equipment. You're going to have bigger warehouses, right? And you need to bring in those people. You can't just hire for that role. You need to hire
Sure.
for the next 5 roles,
Yep.
right? So ingraining that in your hiring and selecting process is big, and taking it seriously. Because again, a lot of times it's just so many, and again, manufacturing plants, you get so many of them have the warm body syndrome. Just get a heartbeat. Just get a heartbeat
If
in them.
they can fog a mirror.
Exactly. If 100%, and they settle for that, and they have settled for that. And then they're like, well, our attrition, our retention rate is bad, but that's just how it is.
Right.
It's just the way it goes. Like, fuck that, dude. Like, well, it's like this settling bullshit is so. I'm swearing like crazy now. You know, I'm passionate.
Go for it.
They settle. They're like, oh, this is just how it was. Like a 40% retention is normal for us. It's just the type of business it is. Well, then you don't. If you're saying that, you don't really want to be a great business. Like you don't truly want to be successful beyond your tenure.
Yep.
Right. You don't actually want what's best for the people, your customers, and yourself, even really. And that goes with anything.
Yep.
Right. Like even for sales teams, a lot of them are like, our retention's bad. You know, the hours suck. They have to travel a lot. It's like, attract better people. And if you're not attracting good people, why aren't you attracting good people? The same thing with plant, like a manufacturing plant. You should have a development process that says, if I bring somebody in on the line in a grunt role, here's the path they could have to get up here.
Absolutely.
And then hire for that.
Yep.
Not this. Because if you hire for this, you're probably going to attract some shit. Right?
Absolutely.
But if you hire for this and set those standards for that, and you give them that path, that's one thing that there's the studies with Gen Xers. I think it's Gen Xers, right? The new people.
No, those are the Z's. I'm Gen X.
Gen Z, sorry. Right. The Gen Zs is a lot of them, they're lost.
Yeah.
Like when we were growing up, it was go to school. I mean, I didn't follow this. I'm a bad example, but you're supposed to, go to school, you go to college, meet your husband or wife, have kids, and, make $100,000 a year and go on vacation, twice a year to the town over, whatever.
Right.
To me, that sounded boring. That's why I'm here. But we still had that framework. We had a blueprint to follow.
Yeah.
Right. Where Gen Zers, it's like, I can do anything. I don't want to do anything. I don't know how to do anything. So they don't have a map. So, and generally when you're in this type of role will attract typically, obviously not all the time, but typically you want it to attract those types because then you give them that path. You say, okay, you're here. If you work hard and you do this, you'll be here in 3 to 6 months. And then you do X, Y, and Z here, you'll be here in whatever your timeline is, right? You can expedite it all you want, but you give them that path, you give them that opportunity. They see the light at the end of the tunnel. They see a reason to stay, and they see that you're invested in them.
Yep.
Again, a lot of this is just swept under the rug in manufacturing plants because it's just looked at roughneck, redneck roles. Yep. Redneck, I said redneck. I meant roughneck, roughneck roles, whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's just
blue collar.
Like entry level. Yeah. Blue collar, yeah. Whatever color you are, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's just not seen as that. So that's not the priority is not put on hiring for the next 5. And when they're there, give them the path and develop them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. So I ask my guests at the as we're starting to wind down a little bit, what 3 initiatives they've implemented that have changed their company culture. I'm going to change this for you. Give me 3 initiatives that manufacturers, companies in general, because we're starting to get listened to by other skilled trades or, people in other skilled trades. What are 3 things that leaders can do to change their company culture without giving away any of your, Summit Chasers secret sauce that you guys work on there? What are 3 things that leaders could do to change their culture?
Oh no, I'll give it all away. I don't care. Well, one of the thing is, I'll just say it then. So with Summit, like it's a framework acronym, right? So the S in Summit is start with you. So it's personal development. Okay. And a lot of leaders, like you're supposed to be the ceiling.
Yeah.
Right. You're supposed to be the ceiling, and your business, it's very hard for your business to exceed past that ceiling, which is you. So personal development, when people see that you're investing in yourself, you see that you're reading, you're talking about something that you read or you learned, you're talking about, a workshop that you're doing or whatever it is, it rubs off on people. Right. Sure. And obviously then you're learning things to pour into your business. You create different habits, different behaviors. You're usually when you start going down that path, your inner circle changes. You attract and you're around higher caliber people. Therefore you attract higher caliber people. Then you can attract better talent. You can retain better talent. You can grow your business higher. You can get good, you can get much better, or at least easier, good strategic partnerships or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
So it's developing yourself. Like, start there. Like,
Yep.
your business can't grow past, at least it's difficult for it to sustain where it grows past you, especially when you're the top dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that's a recipe for just being stuck.
Yep.
So I would start there, and then the next thing for the culture is to define what that is.
Got it.
Like, what is it, right?
Yep. What's it mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is that? And again, putting words to it is great. I'm a big fan of like offsite meetings. Like, you get your leadership team together, go offsite, discover what your core values are, define them, like you said, with whether it's core business principles or you just write them out for yourself,
Yep.
and then set tangible, like we call it like a BHAG. Everyone's probably heard of that now. Big hairy
Yep.
audacious goal. Set it. That's your North Star, guided by your core values and principles. Now it's almost like a funnel. Now you have something to funnel people to, like, and you can guide them towards that as well, right? And then because you defined it, it's a lot easier to recognize. It's a lot easier to see in others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then when you're hiring better people, you can see it when you're hiring people, and then you know how to hold people accountable to it. Because like our point of collaborative, this person, they're supposed to be collaborating with the QC department. They're not collaborating at all. And we've had however many jobs go out with, busted screens or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that's in place for a reason, right? In order to be successful, we need to be collaborative. So define it, very clear, abide by it, act it through, right? And then the third one would be just giving your leadership a space, giving your leadership to give their employees, their direct reports, a space to be creative, to be heard, right? Because the best decision-making practices are in a group with, they call it constructive conflict, right? Like, constructive conflict is probably one of the biggest drivers to a healthy culture. Because again, you solve problems better, faster, you're more proactive, right? People are more likely to develop up, right? Because they're constantly challenging each other. They're being called out. They want to improve. No one wants to be called out.
Yeah.
Right? It is what it is. And then again, you open it up to innovate much quicker and stay ahead of the game. So I think that constructive, allowing for and enticing constructive, make sure it's constructive, not just conflict, constructive.
Right.
That constructive conflict. I think that's a big one.
Awesome. I love it. Zach, you have a podcast of your own. What's a podcast?
Yeah, it's just Summit Chasers podcast. It's actually launching in, what's the date today? It's launching in 2 days on the 21st.
All right. Well, this episode will be airing on the 21st. So today, as you're listening to this, when you're done with this episode, listen to the Summit Chasers podcast, but after you listen to this one. Zach, as we finish up here, what do you want to share with the audience that I haven't asked you? What are some parting knowledge bombs that you have for us?
Man, I think we shared quite a bit, but one big thing is, if you listen to my story and if it at all, you're able to relate to it at all, one big thing that I've taken away, even just recently, is to give your past experience, your past accomplishments, your past failures, give it credit for where you're at, and then give it credit for evidence that you can get to where you want to be. Again, that was one thing that I have struggled with in the past, where I want to go is not a direct relation to what I've done. And because I've done what I've done, I don't deserve certain things, but I've overcome a lot, and a lot of people have overcome a lot of things, and they've figured out a lot of things. They've created new skills. And because you've done that before, you now have evidence that you can succeed, right, in anything. So give your past experience some, the credit. Give it the credit that it needs.
I love it. Well, thank you very much, Zach. I appreciate you being on today. This was an absolutely awesome conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I knew it would be after you and I first had our conversation. Thanks for reaching out. I'm glad you were able to join today. Everybody, this has been a lot of fun, but that's a wrap for today's episode of the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. We've had an extraordinary hour with Zach Carlin, whose journey from waking up in a slide to being a triple threat athlete to now a transformative business leader has left us with some invaluable insights and strategies for nurturing culture and leadership in the manufacturing industry and beyond. From flipping gyms to scaling businesses, Zach's unique blend of tenacity, innovation, and leadership has truly redefined what it means to drive positive change in the industries that he's touched. Don't forget, you can relive this episode and explore many more at the manufacturingculturepodcast.com. That's manufacturingculturepodcast.com. Dive into our treasure trove of content where the heart of manufacturing culture beats the loudest. Again, a huge thank you to Spironi for their unwavering support and sponsorship. Their commitment to precision and excellence mirrors the spirit of our podcast and the amazing guests that we feature. Now it's over to you, our fantastic listeners. Share this episode with your friends, your colleagues, and anyone passionate about the world of manufacturing, company culture, or just hearing stories about human beings. Your shares help spread these powerful stories and strategies far and wide. While you're at it, take a moment to rate and review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to or on YouTube if you're watching us. Your feedback not only fuels our growth, but it also helps bring more compelling content your way. It's the content that you want, and it helps drive us up the charts. Stay tuned for more episodes where we will dive deep into the culture of manufacturing, bringing you the stories, strategies, and leaders that are shaping our industry's future. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep innovating, keep inspiring, and keep manufacturing a culture of excellence. Have a great day and keep making things.